Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're super excited to have all of you here with us. We'll get started in a minute or two. So if you want to go ahead and grab a water, grab a snack, feel free to go ahead and do that. And then we'll get started in about 60 to 90 seconds.
I'd love to know where folks are calling in from and what institution everyone represents. Feel free to ping it in the chat.
Yes, we always love to see where folks are coming from. Like Jen said, it's fun. We're all spread out across the country.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, awesome. Looks like we have a couple of folks chatting in here, seeing PA, Utah State, Florida, Dallas. Great to see.
Madrid, very cool. It must be late for you right now. Thank you for joining.
All right, great. Well, while folks are continuing to trickle in, I think we can go ahead and get started and kick off with some introductions here. So I can go ahead and go first. Hi, everyone. My name is Bridget Moran, and I'm our content manager here at Coursedog. So focused on all things content, research, academic operations. Super excited to be here today and to have this conversation with Matt and Jen. And I'll go ahead and pass it over to Matt now to introduce himself.
Hello, Matt Winn. I'm a senior analyst here with the Tambellini Group, and I cover a wide variety of different areas of research, including student systems, learning management systems, anything academic operations related. The Tambellini Group is a research analyst and advisory firm, and we work with institutions all across the nation.
Hey everyone, my name is Jen. I lead product marketing here at Coursedog. My role is really to work with our product and marketing teams to make sure that we're building and sharing the products and features that really resonate with institutions like all of you today.
Great. All right. Well, before we go ahead and dive into things, I want to give everyone just a quick overview of what we're going to be talking about today. So first, Matt is going to be walking us through some of the challenges that the academic operations space is currently facing today. And then we'll also look at, where some of those opportunities for innovation are and think about, where can we be seizing those opportunities to help us address some of those current challenges and really think more about where we can improve our processes and the use of technology. And then finally, we'll take a look at some of the areas where we think, there's going to be a big focus next year. And I'm particularly excited about this section. Matt's going to be walking us through some case studies of how he's seeing institutions really begin to, think about revamping their business processes and maybe even leveraging AI in some cases. So that's going to be great. We'll also talk about how some of those use cases can be directed towards improving student outcomes, which I know is a focus for all of us. And at the end, we'll leave some time for Q&A. But that being said, if you do want to go ahead and submit questions throughout the session, feel free to put those in the chat or the Q&A function, and we'll do our best to either get to them in the moment or save them until the end. We're also going to do a few polls throughout today's session as well. We definitely always love hearing from all of you, hear about, what you're working on and what your approaches at your institution look like. And then one final thing that I'll also know, I know everyone's always asking, will I receive the recording? Will I receive the slides? Yes, we will be sending those out, so you'll have those for your reference. You should be receiving an email tomorrow morning with all of that information. Okay, great. Well, I think we can go ahead and get into it then. As I just mentioned during our agenda, we're going to start off today by looking at some of the current challenges in academic operations. Matt will be sharing a bit about what he's seeing in the market and what he's seeing with the institutions that he works with. And then we'll also share some of the responses that we've received from higher ed leaders when we've asked them about what types of challenges they're currently facing.
Great. Well, thanks, Bridget. So, as we do this research and as we talk to different institutions, we continue to see some of the same impacts, pressures, pain points across the institution for a variety of different areas. One of the ones that we see at a lot of institutions is budget constraints, and I think this probably resonates with a lot of people that are on this call. As enrollment is declining and things are getting more expensive, it's becoming increasingly more difficult to invest in new technology and resources. And it's also forcing institutions to make tough decisions, whether or not they're going to move in a certain direction or not, or in some cases with academic programs, sunsetting those programs. And so it's really changing the way higher education is having to do business on almost a day-to-day basis. Another one is within data management and governance. And we'll talk a little bit more about this later. But almost every institution that we talk to has data issues. Whether you're a large system or a small private institution or anything in between, in terms of accessing the data, it being having that integrity, being able to report on that, the security of that data. We see it, showing up in a lot of different ways, and then there's a few different types of debt, I think, that most institutions have also. One is just technical debt. And really, it is outdated systems across the board. And a lot of times, these systems are not getting updated for a variety of different reasons. It could come back to those budget constraints. It could be just a matter of time. It could be cultural. It also, a lot of institutions are facing sort of change fatigue. And so they're trying to be more strategic about making some of these changes in more of a sustainable way to not overwhelm their customers or their clients or their people at the institution. Some other ones are process debt. We find this a lot. We do a lot of work helping institutions select new products, but also doing sort of readiness and change management assessments. And we do find a lot of process debt where over the course of 20 years or more, institutions develop processes and they've sort of done the same thing the same way for many years and haven't necessarily kept up with best business practices. And so there's a lot of workarounds and there's a lot of things that are holding institutions back from being able to have a modern experience. And then, last one I think is a cultural debt too. Sometimes there's just resistance within the organization, and it can really just slow down the adoption of new processes and technology. It can impact the overall efficiency. And when we talk about modernization, we're often talking about people, process, data, technology. And oftentimes the technology is actually the lowest concern. And a lot of times, institutions have to do significant groundwork in making those changes before they can really fully utilize that technology, or they're just spending money on a technology hoping that it's going to solve all their problems when there's a lot of things that they can do before they get to that point. So right now, there's a lot of challenges that are disrupting the technology market in higher education. One is the growth of AI. I mean, we are seeing it everywhere. I can't think of a single conference that I've been to in the last year where AI was not the focus. Even our company's focus for our conferences has been on AI. It's just a very hot topic right now. And institutions are using it in a variety of different ways. I think there's still a lot of cautious optimism or skepticism about AI and whether or not there's really value that's being brought. And so we're seeing also a lot of hype, and we're seeing also a lot of application of AI that doesn't always make sense and seems more like a toy than something that institutions can really leverage for efficiency and effectiveness gains. New technology overshadowing and remedial efforts. I kind of alluded to this on the previous slide, but there are times with many institutions where there is the propensity to try to buy your way out of a problem. And a lot of times, senior leaders or whomever can get caught up in the shiny new software package that's out there that perhaps other institutions are using, and there's a rush to find the funds to implement it. And sometimes they find themselves exactly in the same place because there's some basic level things, whether it comes to data, culture, process that haven't been addressed. And so that, unfortunately, if there's too many negative experiences at a campus because of a situation like that, then it can increase the cultural resistance to change. Another thing that we're seeing is expectations are rapidly outpacing the resources that institutions have. If you think about technology being ubiquitous in everybody's lives, whether it's our students or our faculty, we are experiencing some pretty high-level technology on a regular basis, whether it's the iPhone in our pocket when we get home and we're talking to the Alexa or whatever the case may be. We're seeing the fruit of innovation that's coming to the consumer outside of higher education, but we're not necessarily seeing the same sort of innovation, the pace of innovation coming into higher education. And so a lot of times we have a disconnect where people experience this high level of technology in their personal life, but when they come to work, they're really behind in these areas. And then also there's the pressure of legacy systems. It's really causing a lot of disruptions. There are still some major systems like finance, student HCM that are largely on-prem and not in the cloud. And a lot of these vendors, and there's good reason for it, are coming to their clients and saying, we're not going to do this forever, right? We're not going to offer this product in this way indefinitely. And so, you have a choice to move to the cloud and get ahead of that. And some institutions are doing that. I think a lot of institutions are taking a wait and see approach, but it is forcing a lot of change in institutions because institutions don't want to be caught in a scenario where they're forced to do it on a shorter timetable than maybe they have the resources to accomplish.
Yes, I think a lot of that resonates with all of us here today, Matt. But that being said, I know some of the challenges that you just walked through definitely doesn't even cover everything that you all are facing on a day-to-day basis. A few months ago, we gathered over 200 leaders in the academic operations space together, and during one of those sessions, we asked them to share, what challenges are you facing today? And I think you'll see on this slide, a lot of the themes do relate to what Matt was just discussing, whether that's poor access to data, maybe some of those process challenges. But I think what really jumps out to me here is the human element of these challenges. We know that many of you are dealing with staff turnover, resistance to change, maybe some of that change fatigue. So I know that this is always an important element to consider, and I want to make sure that that kind of frames our conversation going forward. When we're thinking about, some of those exciting opportunities that we can maybe look towards as well. So I want to go ahead and do our first poll now. As we're moving into the section where we're talking about, opportunities for your institution, I would love to hear from you all. Where does your institution have the most opportunity to innovate? So you'll see that it's a single select here where we're going to force you to choose just one. So if you could just focus on one area now, where would you be thinking about? All right, I'm seeing these responses come in, which is great. We'll leave it open though for another 20 to 30 seconds. So if you haven't had a chance, and yes, I'm seeing that we're getting a couple of responses in the chat here. Predictive modeling for scheduling. Yes, that's something we at Coursedog are thinking a lot about. So I know that that's something we're briefly going to be chatting about later in this webinar. All right, we can probably go ahead and close the poll now and share out the results so everyone can see that. Okay, so it looks like we have two big winners here. Upgrading old tools to new tech systems definitely resonates a lot with what Matt was just talking about. And then re-examining and streamlining those business processes. Yes, I know that that's not always the most exciting topic for folks, but it really can make a big difference. So that makes a lot of sense to me. Matt, when you see these poll results, is anything jumping out at you?
No, specifically, I think given our audience, if we have a lot of people on the call that are sort of the end users, right? Then I wouldn't be surprised to see that some of those things are leading because they're the ones that are using it every day. They're the ones that are seeing the impact of out-of-date processes or inefficient processes. So, it might look different if all senior leaders took this poll versus end users, but I think this is pretty much on par.
All right, fantastic. Well, for our next section, we're going to be walking through a few different areas where we think that there's really a lot of opportunity for innovation in the academic operations space. So in this section, we're going to focus on three main areas. First, data-driven decision making. So I know this can apply to pretty much any area across higher ed, but specifically, we're going to talk a bit about what this means for thinking about your program offerings and then what courses you offer each term. Next, streamlining business processes, clearly a big area of interest for folks on the line. And that makes sense. I think a lot of you are being asked to do more and more, and often with smaller teams. So streamlining those business processes, of course, makes you more efficient. But I think it's also important when thinking about, how can you alleviate some of that pressure that your team is feeling, from those tasks that keep piling up on your plate. And then finally, rethinking higher ed's model. I know this is a trend that folks in the industry have been talking about for it feels like years at this point, but it does feel like we're finally hitting an inflection point where many institutions are thinking about, how can we make meaningful changes? Institutions are beginning to more seriously think about what types of programs they offer, how those offerings are structured, and then of course how they're delivered to students. And this doesn't just impact, how students are receiving their education, but then also how all of you work, how the institution operates, makes hiring decisions and supports students. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at each of these three areas in a bit of a deeper dive here. So I think I probably don't need to remind most of you, why we need to take a closer look at our academic offerings. The long predicted demographic cliff is, just about upon us, and it's only been exacerbated the past few years by the pandemic, the disastrous FAFSA rollout, many of those external factors that are going on. We also know that the labor market is constantly changing and students need those new skills as technology evolves and new demands are made of the workforce. And as a result of these changes, there will be some workers who are displaced and they'll need to think about, how can I gain those skills in a way that's, faster and more convenient than the traditional degree? So what does this mean for colleges and universities? I think for some, that means that offering the same programs and credentials with little change is no longer a viable option. Institutions will need to look around at their local and regional labor markets to, really assess what types of skills employers need. And then they'll also have to look at, what types of students are likely to enroll and what types of needs they have. And then beyond the mix of programming offered, institutions also need to think about how their programs are delivered. So rolling the schedule over from term to term, probably isn't going to address those emerging needs. And in some cases, it may not even be meeting, your current needs in the first place. There might be those high demand courses that are always overfilled and, more sections really need to be offered to meet that student demand. Or, maybe thinking about when you're offering that programming. Perhaps you have a lot of working students who, need those asynchronous methods or need those night courses. So there's definitely a lot to consider here, but I think it really does point us to the fact that taking a closer look at the data can really help institutions make more informed decisions about what they're offering and how they're offering it. So I want to go ahead and get into our second poll question now. Thinking about curricular offerings and how your institution is addressing it. I'm guessing that we probably have institutions across the spectrum here, folks who are really actively thinking about it versus folks, maybe there's a little more resistance at their institution. So I'd love to hear from you all. How are you doing? And let's share out after this. Okay, responses are coming in. Very excited to share this one out. We'll leave it open for another 15 seconds or so, and then we'll go ahead and share out the results.
I'd also be curious if folks want to share in the chat how their institution is deciding on the appropriate changes to make their curriculum. Are you working with like a third-party research firm to understand local labor demands? Is this primarily an internal project? Are there tools that you're using? I'm sure a lot of you are also probably curious what other institutions are doing here as well.
Yes, I'd also be very curious to hear that if anyone would like to share in the chat. Okay, well, I think we can go ahead and close the poll question now and share out the results to everyone. Okay, so it looks like almost half of you say, yes, we are making changes, but not quickly enough. And yeah, I think that resonates a lot with what we're hearing from folks in the market. I think people are aware they need to make those changes. But as we all know, the program review process, the curriculum approval process can take quite a while sometimes when you're moving through so many different approval steps, committees, all of that. So I know that that's something we definitely think a lot about at Coursedog is, how can we make that more quickly? Matt, Jen, anything else you'd like to add here?
I think you said it right. I mean, having sat in on those meetings many years, these things do not happen quickly and they're time consuming, and a lot of institutions are under resourced from a faculty standpoint. And so finding the time to teach, to research, to rewrite curriculum, to get things through processes, it doesn't surprise me, right, that this is not very easy to move quickly.
I think it's also a question of having the right data to be able to act on some of these changes. I think what we hear a lot of times with our institutions is that we want to make these changes, but what is the right starting point and how do you actually quantify the right curricular changes to even make in the first place?
Absolutely.
So when we look at institutions that are streamlining business processes, there is a mix that are in the middle of the process that still have some legacy systems or are moving to more modern systems. In the academic operations space, what we find is only about 70% are using some sort of system. So there's about 30% of the institutions in North America that don't have any system at all. And, some of you might be on this call, right? Where PDFs and signatures and Word documents are still kind of Excel sheets of the way things that are happening. Some of you might be lucky enough to still have those inter-campus envelopes, right? And send things through the mail. And so there's still a lot of opportunity here for institutions to take advantage of some of this technology. Of the 70% that are using something, about half, a little over half, 60% of those are using a legacy operations system, meaning that they have had a system in place for quite a while and maybe haven't reevaluated whether or not that system is keeping pace, may not be updated, it might not be integrated with the student system. I think one of the things that we hear from time to time is that these tools can sometimes take a backseat for these institutional priorities, right? And so I think some institutions kind of get caught up in the it's good enough, right? Scenario, and they're not necessarily focusing a lot of attention on it. But as we'll talk here, maybe on the next slide or so, I think it's worth a conversation. And then we're only seeing about 19% of institutions that have made a move onto modern student systems, like a cloud-based modern student system. A lot of institutions are taking a wait and see approach, but having legacy systems really does minimize their ability to modernize work. And so there's a lot of different factors leading to why institutions haven't necessarily adopted modern tools yet. So when we look at kind of going a little bit deeper into that conversation, over the last decade or so, as institutions have been modernizing these core systems, we have found that finance and HCM really led the decision. And in some cases, that was all that was available. And the student system, the SIS, however you want to refer to it, really was a secondary consideration. And so a lot of schools either implemented something and it was rough, or they did finance and HCM and they put the brakes on student because it was a bigger move than they suspected. Or, as with a lot of institutions, again, it's kind of that wait and see, right? What are my peers going to do? What can we afford? Is the vendor that we're working with presently going to do more? And so we are starting to see a shift, though, where institutions are starting to think about the student system first as their primary decision. Because I think what we've all realized at this point is most of the time, the back office administration folks and finance and HR, they can work with anything, right? Maybe not anything, but of the choices of the modern system, they would likely be fine. But as I mentioned a minute ago, anything touching the student, right, is more difficult, and it's where a lot of maybe non-best practice is most prevalent in some of these areas. And of the institutions that are considering sort of what to do about student that haven't made the move yet, there is a lot of thinking that goes into that. These systems are very difficult to move. On average, we're seeing student system migrations to take about 2 years. A lot of historical data. There's a lot of revisiting processes and learning what should be done and what could be done. And so what ends up happening is you end up having schools that start to modernize around the student system. So either they go full in and buy the new student system, bite the bullet, and they make the move, or they look at some of these other systems like catalog curriculum management, scheduling, some of these things that are more end user facing that can improve the experience for students and faculty without having to go to the trouble of changing out their core student system. And then, in terms of modernization, right, I mentioned that some of these systems are sort of considered like a second tier of priority, where historically it's been, well, this is good enough. I think we're finding right now is that that's no longer accurate, that good enough isn't good enough. Because of all the challenges that we talked about earlier in the presentation, institutions are being forced to do more with less. And as some of these technologies evolve, really these conversations are coming back up to the surface, especially when license renewals are in, to say what else is out there, and do we have the best solution for our institution? There's also new things happening with integrations and with AI and with data that is driving the modernization. And then I think lastly, one of the things that we've seen is there were probably a lot of bad data practices that have existed for many, many, many years. But because the systems weren't necessarily integrated, there was always someone that was making a human intervention and fixing the data somewhere along the way. When institutions began to integrate and automate processes, that's when we started to see things that were problematic. And one of the things I love talking to registrars. I don't know why, I just have a really soft spot in me for registrars. And I've talked to a few, and one of the things that they've done over the last 20 years is sort of be the unsung hero cleaning up messes. And so things will get to their desk and it may not be in the right format, it might be incorrect, or it might be whatever, and they're cleaning it up so that the student system is in the best shape possible. But when you start automating those tasks, people like the registrar can't intervene anymore. And one of the ways that I saw this take place when I was at the institution is whenever we started automating enrollment reporting. Where historically the institution had done it very manually. When we went to automated enrollment reporting, we were finding that there was a disconnect between numbers that admissions would have and numbers that we were producing for the university. And so we really had to go in and find where the problems were, and that forced us to have better data management so that the outputs matched, right, if you will. So lots of challenges in this age of modernization for sure. So one of the things that I think is important is that we sort of begin to rethink the model of higher education. I thought a lot about this in the last year or so, but at the end of the day, I think one of the things that we have to kind of come to grips with, and I know this may not be something popular to say, but the institutions that we work at are businesses. They have money coming in and money going out, and there's a lot of revenue and expenses and profits. And as things get tighter, right, then institutions are having to make different decisions. And so I think one of the things that higher ed can do is learn from other industries. Other industries that have customers that are making decisions, that are using data, they tend to be several years ahead of where higher education is in some of those areas. And so there's an opportunity to learn from what's happening there and maybe rethink some of the processes at the institution. And then, as I kind of mentioned, right, we have to start thinking about the institution as a business. And there's a lot of reasons why things are difficult. Now, I understand that, faculty autonomy and faculty, whatever you want to call it, control or influence on the direction of the institution. I understand and I agree that that's really important. I was a full-time faculty member myself and the dean, and so I get it. But at the same time, we have to realize that we cannot continue to make academic decisions that are devoid of current reality and current data that's available to us, or it's just not going to be sustainable. If we are not bringing the students in and keeping the students that we have, there's not going to be money to keep those doors open and to keep the faculty in the office. And so I do think that we have to start thinking kind of like a little bit differently about how we go about this. Another thing that we have to do is really just reevaluate our offerings. And this can happen from data within in terms of looking at enrollment trends, enrollment data, the students that are coming in, where they're at in their degree plan, what we're offering. But also we should be pulling data from the outside as well. What is the job market demanding? What does the job market within a certain radius of our institution look like? What are job postings? What skills are they calling for? What degrees are they calling for? And then, making changes to that. The other thing that is sort of coming down the pipe, as Bridget mentioned, we're hitting this kind of enrollment cliff that's going to be coming, and there's a lot of concern about that. But the thing that we can't miss is, yes, there might be less traditional age students that are coming to universities at some point here in the next couple of years. There are many adults out there that need to complete degrees. And as technology continues to evolve and change industries, it's going to be imperative for the labor force to come back and be upskilled and reskilled. So institutions really need to be thinking about that in their planning. I tend to kind of think about stores, right? You might think, let's take Target, for example, right? Can you imagine if a company like Target made decisions based on somehow some of our institutions do, right? It would be problematic. At the end of the day, Target is looking at the data and making decisions about what products to offer, when to offer them, and even where to put them in the store. I think a lot of us would be really surprised, and we probably don't want to know the extent to which we're being tracked by some of these companies and how that is affecting the decisions that they make. But the reality is that's what's happening in the world. And we need to find ways to use the data to do the same. And not only so that, we can keep the doors open and pay our people well, but ultimately, the better we do at offering the right things, the more positive impact we have on our community, the better we're helping our students be prepared for what's coming. And so it really is, at the end of the day, about the students. And I do think that rethinking the model is going to benefit them, not hurt them. And then, finally, looking at faculty hiring. I think that this is critical, and it's really important that we are really looking at data to help predict this and see what we need and when we're going to need it. I do think that part-time versus full-time faculty is difficult, especially when accrediting bodies like SACS want to see a certain percentage of full-time faculty. But the reality is, at some point, some of these part-time or adjunct faculty, they bring a lot to the table. A lot of them are working professionals in their field. And so there is a tremendous amount of opportunity to leverage them to keep things current at the institution. They bring in some current knowledge.
Yes, super insightful, Matt, and very excited for this next section here where we're going to be walking through some of those case studies, specifically around some of those areas we've been discussing today, like new business practices, implementing AI, how we can focus on student outcomes. So I think this is going to be a great section. Then after that, we'll be able to get into Q&A. So like I said, if you do have any questions, feel free to drop those in the chat throughout.
So, some of the things that we need to be hitting next and really are important. One is we've got to be able to make faster decisions. And sometimes, technology assists us in that. A lot of times it's process and culture and people that are going to get us there. But we can't make decisions at the rate that we're making them now because things are changing too fast out in the industry. Another thing that we need to do is really establish business continuity. One of the things that we're seeing is there are a lot of folks in institutions that have held a similar same job for multiple decades that are at or near retirement age. And the workforce that's coming behind them, they are not trending towards staying in any one place for that amount of time. And so institutions that have we'll call it bespoke processes and non-traditional way of doing things, it's going to be much more difficult for that institutional knowledge to walk away and for the institution to have business continuity. So just another reason why things need to be modernized and standardized as much as possible. So if we look, we're going to, the last couple minutes here, just look at a few different case studies and institution. One is Pratt University. They have implemented Coursedog, just so happens to be the course, who the webinar is for today, but they've really seen a tremendous amount of efficiency gain. So they're reducing the time to approval by 90%. They have reviewed and made changes to curriculum a large amount over a few month period. And they're using workflows to expedite that. And we've seen that in other institutions as well, where some processes that were done, manually took 4 months. When a process is automated, can be done in as little as 2 weeks, right? And there's a lot of fear that jobs are going to get replaced. But at the end of the day, we always have more that we want to do than we have the resources to do. So I think it's all about resource reallocation. And then Vanderbilt is working with AWS, and they're using generative AI in a lot of different ways, trying to improve scheduling for students. Use the use of chatbots and agents to answer questions in specific areas. We're starting to see that a lot in different places. And then doing document analysis and finding, either issues with policies or contracts and really trying to be able to answer questions there. We're seeing AI in a lot of different places. Kind of run through this quickly. Academic operations really is going to be focused on optimizing things and making the best use of the resources that we have. Also, if you think about trying to help students guide them through the catalog, which can be a daunting task. And then, building reports for accreditation, things like that are going to be, areas in which AI can really benefit an institution. Teaching and learning, there are a lot of opportunities. We're seeing a lot take place in this area. Assistance for content creation, assistance in assessment creation and assessing students and students being able to assess themselves. There's a lot there. Could be dangerous if not used correctly, but if it's truly used as a resource to augment the subject matter expert, then there's really good potential there. And then really generally at institutions, focusing on some of that higher level work and automating some of those tasks that could be done to free us up to do better work down the line. It is going to be a increasing expectation to see this type of opportunity in the workplace. And as I mentioned, there is some uncertainty about what if this holds for the future. Who's going to be replaced? Is anybody going to be replaced? And do I need to be upskilled, right, to be able to keep pace with the innovation that's happening in the market? Okay, there we go. And so we're seeing AI, right, taking place in different places. University of Florida really is putting it in every nook and cranny they have at the institution, and really kind of have a mandate from the provost that AI is not specifically for the science fields or the technology fields, but it needs to be taught in every area. They're using it to help them make decisions as well. With University of Western Cape, using chatbots, right, and agents to help students navigate their curriculum journey. We're starting to see more of that. There's even, I was at another conference 2 weeks ago where they are beginning to put some of this technology into their product for this very specific reason. And then Park University is really using a lot of AI in a lot of places, but trying to, master how they are planning for different faculty activity and trying to use data to inform that. And so one of the reasons that we're doing all of this is we're starting to see some different things happen. There is a pressure to improve student outcomes, whether that's from the accreditors, or whether or not it's the sort of narrative about the devalue education, the student loan crisis, people not being able to get jobs or pay their bills. So there is a pressure to increase student outcomes and align them better. There's accountability for these outcomes, and a lot of times that's tied to financial aid or accreditation. And so we're going to see, some increasing pressure there. And then also, student outcomes they are connected to a lot of different areas of academic operations, right? Creating a schedule, assessing a program and its effectiveness, right? Developing that curriculum. I think there are a lot of ways in which these products go together in a meaningful way. And I think we're just scratching the surface right now on how we can improve student outcomes.
All right. Well, we have another poll question for you all today. Thinking about how you can make your academic operations more student-centric. I know Matt just touched on a couple of the ways, that can really manifest across the institution, but would love to hear from you all. Okay, we'll leave it open for another 10 to 15 seconds, and then we'll go ahead and share out to everyone. All right, let's go ahead and close the poll and share it out to folks. Okay, so this one is pretty interesting. It looks like we have a fairly good spread across these four, but it looks like learning outcomes and program performance, and then using technology to help students navigate those academic requirements are two of the top ones that folks are thinking about. Matt, does this resonate with you and the institutions that you work with?
Absolutely. I mean, I think they're all important, and they're important to every institution we talk to, which is why I think we see kind of an even spread here.
All right. Well, I think we have just a couple of more slides and then we will get to Q&A.
So just a couple more examples of, institutions that are leveraging technology to enhance what's happening for students. Northern Arizona University doing a personalized learning platform that is competency-based and self-paced, right? And is using different technology for students to have more of a non-traditional experience, but that's highly personalized to them. And then the University of South Florida that is doing so much with AI and has so many different case studies of what they're doing. But using that generative AI for course design to make courses better for students, but then also assessing student feedback and integration into assessments and really understanding how effective these courses are.
Thanks so much, Matt. We're just about to wrap up here before Q&A. It's probably very clear to everyone that Matt is just a wealth of knowledge when it comes to academic operations, and we're really appreciative of him taking the time to join us today. Before we move on to the Q&A portion, I just want to also shed some light on why we partner with Matt and the Tambellini Group. So as Matt discussed, there are plenty of challenges currently impacting academic operations, but with those challenges, there are really a lot of opportunities also for innovation. I'm obviously biased here coming from Coursedog. If you're interested in future-proofing your academic operations or see opportunities for innovation, highly recommend including Coursedog in your due diligence. We provide an integrated academic operations platform that enables you to manage your entire academic life cycle in a single solution. You can see that we offer a lot of different products, so you could actually pick and choose what solutions you want to start off with, and it's really easy to expand is all of our solutions leverage a single unified data set with that one bi-directional integration back to your SIS. Our mission at Coursedog is to eliminate operational barriers to student success. Is one that means a lot to the folks that work here, and we really believe that a strong operating system can really transform core processes like curriculum management, scheduling, events into levers that impact student success. Quick spiel from me here. If you'd like to learn more, we're going to share out a poll in just a sec for you to indicate your interest, and one of our sales reps will reach out to you directly.
Yes, that sounds great, Jen.
Go to the next slide here, Bridget. I just remember I'm also responsible for launching the poll.
Yes, so we will just have this very quick poll question here. But in the meantime, for any questions that folks may have, feel free to submit those in the chat. I know that that can sometimes take a second to think about that, type them out. So we'll give everyone a second there to pause and put in any questions that they may have. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions just yet, so feel free to type in the chat. But in the meantime, Matt, I think that something a lot of institutions are thinking about is, where do I start? I think it can be pretty overwhelming to think about, do I start with overhauling my processes, implementing a new piece of technology, AI? So if an institution came to you and said, Matt, where is one place that's going to be very impactful that I should focus on first? What type of advice would you give there?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times we would advise, to start somewhere that's kind of manageable where you can see some instant success. A lot of times we do recommend things like catalog curriculum management to be one of those, or identity management, or integrations. One of the things that's possible, and I don't think I talked about this today, when you're doing a curriculum catalog management ahead of a possible student system migration, it allows you to, uncover some of those process and data issues. It allows you to sort of migrate to Coursedog being a source of record for this information, even if not for the long term. And then, once all of that is in place and working, then institutions can take on a student system migration with a little bit more ease, in that they've already adjusted some processes and they're able to, send the integration to two systems at once and kind of populate the new system, as they're getting ready to make a change. And then also, using it as an avenue to populate historical data. And so we try to help them find things that are manageable, that will also, pay dividends down the road as they take on bigger projects.
Yes, I think that's a great piece of advice. And I know a lot of partners have said, by adopting Coursedog or it could be any other piece of technology, it's kind of forced us to have those conversations that, we keep kicking those cans down the road, but now we're finally able to have that buy-in and have these critical conversations.
Yeah.
I'm seeing a question from Thomas here. If you want to go ahead and address that, Matt. And he's wondering, what FERPA concerns are there for hosting student data in the cloud?
Sure. Yeah. And, the platforms that are being used to host these systems, are the best platforms on the planet, right? Whether it's AWS or whoever that provider is, there is a lot of money being put into security to keep that data safe. When it comes to FERPA data getting out, I'm always more concerned about the practices happening at the institution, right? For example, you never really think about the fact of exporting something from your student system into an Excel spreadsheet and then emailing that to someone across campus. Well, even though those two email addresses might be within the same domain, right, a .edu domain, all it takes is for one person to send it to the wrong person, to forward it, right, and then that data is exposed. I think there's a greater risk of exposing FERPA data at the institution with outdated processes than there is a concern with using a cloud-based student system.
Very interesting. I'm seeing another question here in the chat that I think Jen would probably be able to answer well. Jose mentioned that their institution uses Anthology as their SAS, and they're wondering, if Coursedog is able to integrate with Anthology and how that can really help with their processes.
Totally, that's a great question, Jose. So we do have plenty of customers currently that have Anthology as their SIS and also use Coursedog. We can actually send over to, after the webinar is over, all of our integration details around Anthology, so you can do a deep dive there. But we offer best practices when it comes to the Anthology SIS integration. If you're interested, we can even get you in-person time with one of our data engineers to learn more about what the integration would look like.
All right. Well, if anyone has any final questions, feel free to drop those in the chat. But if not, definitely feel free to follow up with us afterwards. You'll find all of our contact information here. And like I mentioned, we will be sending out the deck and recording to everyone, so you'll have access to that. But that being said, if there are no more questions, I think we can go ahead and end a minute or two early. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. It's been a great conversation. I've loved all of the engagement through the poll questions. And of course, a special thank you to Matt for joining us as well and sharing his expertise.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.